Dallas Stars retired a jersey over the weekend, and they happen to be one of the hotter teams in the NHL. Dane Lewis from Locked On Stars joins us to talk about that and more on the Locked On NHL podcast.
You're Locked On NHL, your daily podcast on the National Hockey League. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome back to the Locked On NHL podcast, and thank you for making Locked On NHL your first listen every day. We are free and available on all platforms. Right now, it's my pleasure to welcome back to the show the host of Locked On Stars, Dane Lewis. Dane, welcome back.
Hey, yo, I'm glad to be here. Glad to be talking hockey with you.
Always a pleasure to have you here, and I'll tell you, let's start with Friday, the Dallas Stars retiring Sergei Zubov's number. And I'll tell you, Zubov is one of those players where he belongs in the Hall of Fame. He is in the Hall of Fame. But if you didn't watch him game in and game out, he never had the name recognition that a lot of other Hall of Famers had. Talk to me about his game and what made him such a special player.
Sure. And I fall under that demographic of guys who didn't watch him game in and game out. I was 6 months old when the Stars won the Stanley Cup back in '99, and wasn't too much into hockey in my younger days, but got to do a lot of research on him this past week and dedicated the whole episode to Zubov, kind of talking about his career. And clearly with the retirement on Friday, got to learn a lot about him as well. And it's interesting, I 100% agree. He's a Hall of Famer, and I know he's already in the Hockey Hall of Fame. And, just based on what he did for the Stars, it makes sense that his number's now up there amongst guys like Madonna and, some other greats up there in the Dallas Stars rafters. But yeah, I mean, just from what, we see, even back when he was with the New York Rangers, the season that they won the Stanley Cup in '94, I think he led the team in points as a defenseman, which in today's NHL would just be unheard of, I think, just about. But, he certainly paved the way for so many good NHL defensemen in today's game, whether it's Adam Fox, Cale Makar, even Miro Heiskanen, who plays for the Stars now. Just kind of, obviously there's not the only offensive-minded defenseman in the National Hockey League, but a guy that certainly has paved the way. And I'm sure if you ask a lot of guys that play defensemen now, and you ask them who they watched growing up or who they kind of, modeled their game after, I think Sergei Zubov would certainly have to be one of those guys. Like you said, maybe not always getting the name recognition, certainly playing along big names like Madonna and, Ed Belfour playing goalie for that team. But it was just really cool to get to watch that ceremony and see those teammates of his, especially those teammates from that '99 Stanley Cup team, being there in attendance down there on the ice and just seeing how happy they were for Sergei to get his jersey retired, even though Sergei, and even, people were saying this all the ceremony, he didn't communicate much with the media whenever he was playing and was always kind of kept to himself. Part of that being that he was from Russia and didn't speak English very well and was new to the country, but you could just tell how much he was loved by the teammates, how much the fans loved him. The applause was, thunderous whenever he came out on the ice, and just a really, really cool moment for a guy that, like you said, had a pretty underrated career, but certainly a deserving of Hall of Fame type career and deserving to have his number retired. The only player in Stars franchise history, from the North Stars even to the Dallas Stars, to wear the number 56, and now he's the only one that ever will.
Yeah, and one of the things that Zubov did so well was play on the power play. Very good, setting up his teammates. And that tradition seems to be carrying over to this year. Dallas, 4th in the league on the power play. It's a big part of their offensive production. Talk about this year's team and what makes this power play click so well.
Yeah, I think part of it, is just a lot of times when they start that power play, they have their top line on the ice of Joe Pavelski, Rupe Hintz, and Jason Robertson, who's a good line anyway when the Stars play 5-on-5, but you give them that man advantage where they can work in a guy like John Klingberg or Miro Heiskanen or even Ryan Suter. It just makes the team so much more dangerous. This team has a lot of veterans on the squad that, have been in this league for a long time, and they, especially those defensemen like Klingberg and Suter, know how to run that power play from the point, similar to how Zubov would do it. I think that just helps whenever you have a guy who knows what he's doing at the blue line, and then 4 other guys who, have been around this league for enough time to kind of know where to position themselves and who know their line mates well enough to know how they're going to position themselves. And more often than not, it ends up being a recipe for success for the Stars. Like you said, top 5 unit in the league. If only the penalty kill could keep up. But yeah, certainly the Stars win a lot of games because of their power play.
Yeah, it definitely does help them a lot. You talked about Ryan Suter, veteran guy. What has he added this year by his presence?
Yeah, I think just saying, veteran guy is kind of his big contribution to the team so far, not filling up the stat sheet, maybe necessarily like people would want him to, but I mean, he's also 36 years old. And for some reason, Jim Nill and company thought it was a good idea to sign him to a 4-year deal. And we'll be paying him at least until he's 40, whether or not he's playing here or not. But, he hasn't been a necessarily bad player. I know he'll often be a scapegoat for fans if things aren't going well, but I think he provides a good veteran edge, and especially with guys on the team like Miro Heiskanen, who obviously is, formed into a good defender in his own right, but still, finding kind of his footing in the league and still finding his way. And even younger guys on the team like Yanni Hakanpää, Joel Hanley, Thomas Harley, some defensemen that have come up from the AHL, from taxi squads, things like that. I think just having a guy that's been in this league as long as Suter has, and whenever he was in his prime, was playing at such a high level, he just teaches so well these younger guys. And I think, if the Stars are able to make it into the postseason, that he'll be a nice presence on the team. I say all the time on my show that that's going to be a benefit for the Stars if they're able to sneak into the postseason, just with all the veterans they have, because the playoffs are just a completely different beast than the regular season. And a lot of these younger teams, who knows how they're going to do under the postseason pressure, whereas on the Stars, you have guys like Suter, Pavelski, Seguin, Ben, Radulov, who've all been there before. And a lot of those guys I named were on that Dallas Stars Stanley Cup team 20. And so not for them playing in the postseason in big moments.
You talked about Tyler Seguin. He had a big game against Boston on Sunday. Talk a little bit about his contributions to that win and just what he's been doing in general. I mean, only, 12 goals in his first 41 games, but came through big on Sunday.
Yeah, certainly. It's kind of a perfect storm on Sunday. His birthday is on Monday, and, playing against his former team in his home arena. Really, really cool to see Tyler play the way that he did, and scoring, I believe, the first goal of the game, and then even the second goal he scored, teaming up with his recently added line mate, Denis Gurianov. That second line of Seguin, Ben, and Gurianov kind of being formed after the COVID pause. But yeah, Seguin, a little bit underperforming this year, but I think one thing that we as like spectators of the team are often overlooking is he did have surgery in the offseason. He is turning 30 on Monday, so getting a little bit older in his career, has battled through his fair share of injuries like most players have by this age in the NHL, but still finding ways to contribute. And a lot of times, I feel like lately, he has these games where he has 2 goals and maybe an assist, or 2 assists and a goal, and then he'll kind of be quiet in the stat sheet for a few games, and then he'll rise back up. So if the pattern continues, he'll be quiet for the next few games, but then he'll pop back up in a big way. But maybe this game against his former team adds a little bit extra fuel, and they're able to keep things rolling. I know they only have one more game before the All-Star break, but it's a big one at home against Calgary, and I know the Stars would like to get 2 points there.
No doubt about that. Obviously, the big thing after the All-Star break becomes the trade deadline. Dallas fighting for that playoff spot, as you mentioned. What do you expect them to do at the trade deadline? What are they looking for, and are they buyers or sellers?
Yeah, and that's a very interesting point. I know I was talking about this, I think, on Friday with Tyler from Locked On Caps. We were talking about the trade deadline. I think right now the Stars would be playing the role of sellers a little bit more. I've thought before, and it's hard for me to pinpoint one need that this Stars team has. I mean, they obviously, lose some games that they shouldn't and have areas of struggle, but I think that's more, individuals on the team having a bad night, or the team having a bad night, not necessarily, our right wings are weak or our left wings are weak, defensemen struggling. I think I can see them being more sellers, but also really the only big name I can see them potentially moving is John Klingberg. I've heard Joe Pavelski murmurs come up, but I think, like you said, the Stars team sitting in a position to potentially get that second wild card spot, and with half the season left, who says they can't maybe sneak into that first spot or maybe the third spot in the Central Division? That seems like wishful thinking right now, but there is a lot of hockey left. So I can envision the Stars maybe looking to move a player, most likely John Klingberg, if that happens with his he wants a big 8-year deal. I don't think the Stars are wanting to give that to him, and so he's wanting to go get paid somewhere else, and has expressed that he's not necessarily looking to stay in Dallas long term unless he gets that contract. But I can't imagine them moving too many pieces to get something to add to this roster. If anything, if for some reason they fall out of this playoff race, I can see them potentially moving Klingberg. And then I guess if things get really bad, they can move Pavelski. But if they want to make the playoffs, they need to hold on to Pavelski as long as they can.
Dane, why don't you tell our listeners and our viewers where they could find you on social media and where they could find the podcast?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm on Twitter at Dane_Lewis, and the show is on Twitter at Locked On Stars. And you can find the podcast wherever you listen to podcast at, and on YouTube as well. The show is just like Locked On NHL, free and available just about anywhere you can get a podcast at.
All right, Dane, always a pleasure. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. Always fun to hop on with y'all.